I noticed the trade confirmation at 6:12 a.m., exactly 3 minutes after my coffee machine hissed awake. Subject, settlement notice, 187,500 common shares sold, cleared. Broker, Graybridge Securities. Counterparty, Echelon Holdings Limited Echelon. Neat name. My name, if you followed 3 shell layers and 1 professional trustee through the Channel Islands. I scrolled. They had done it while the market slept and hubris stayed up. Minority cleanup, the memo said. My minor shares, the ones my father called decorative, had been sold in a block by my siblings and the family office that managed all our votes. They believed they'd trimmed dead weight. I took a sip of coffee and smiled. Every smile, a signed document. 3 months earlier, I had sat with an attorney in a windowless room that smelled like metal file cabinets and soft dust. We inked the last annex to the voting trust agreement. A pen in my hand, a notary stamp against paper fibers, a quiet click when the binder closed. The annex assigned beneficial ownership of Echelon Holdings Limited, the fund our family office dismissed as a foreign noise, to a private trust where I was both settler and protector. My uncle, the only one who ever taught me how to add instead of to perform, had told me this when I was 19, don't win arguments. Win definitions. Beneficial owner beats legal swagger every time. On the trade screen, I tapped the settlement price. They'd sold my stake into their own buyer of last resort. My buyer. Their investment committee thought it was clever to move a liquid family shares at a chunky discount to consensus. They had no idea who stood on the other side of the curtain, nodding politely. I finished my coffee. The house was quiet. The mountains outside my glass wall looked like folded velvet. I opened my red folder, the one with edges softened by months of travel, and checked the sequence. SPA, Share Purchase Agreement, already countersigned. Board consent, in escrow. Loan subordination terms from 2 of our lenders, pre-negotiated. A dividend policy draft with 3 options, conservative, growth, triple. I slid the folder back in place. Then my phone lit up with a group text named Family Strategy, the kind of title that tells you everything you need to know about people who don't have a strategy. Dad, emergency family meeting. Tonight. 7 p.m. Big news. We simplified the cap table. Cap table, his latest phrase. Last year it was alpha. The year before, flywheel. I typed, sure. See you then. Every smile, a signed document. The firm was ours by blood, but his by posture. Harrison and Vale packaging wasn't glamorous. We didn't make phones, we made the containers that kept things unbroken. When the economy breathed, we inhaled. Logistics, adhesives, recycled resin, margin as thin as the films we extruded, and still, it compounded. We had distribution contracts that lasted longer than marriages. We had one supplier relationship that predated 2 of my cousins. I built the analytics system that predicted our resin needs at the plant level. They called me the spreadsheet girl and sent me to sit with vendors in conference rooms that smelled like coffee and toner. I learned how to make small talk with men who loved forklifts more than their own families. I learned how to listen when they stopped. When we went public, Dad and my brothers engineered an internal voting trust. For stability, they said. Which meant the same 3 men always voted for the same 3 men. I kept my little parcel of shares outside the trust. Window dressing, Dad told the bankers, smiling like a man who believes the architect who designed the window owes him sunlight. They had the votes. I had time. Time to notice that our shipping contracts had poison pill fuel escalators no one ever triggered because no one wanted to admit they didn't understand them. Time to notice that our once boring adhesives line had a formulation a German competitor couldn't replicate, which meant we could raise price 2% and no one would move. Time to notice that my brother Jason had pledged his shares for a condo with a view of the ocean and a mortgage with a view of his future tears. Time to notice that Dad's favorite aphorism, control beats cash, assumes you can still pay your note. Then the market hiccuped. Freight went sideways. Resin spiked. And the family office, always eager to demonstrate usefulness, proposed a liquidity event on small blocks. Reduce noise. Streamline ownership. Dress the tree. They sold my shares to Echelon. They sold my shares to me. At 7 p.m., my parents' house looked like a catalogue of aspirations: travertine floors, a grand piano no one played, a glass sculpture that wanted to be fragile. My father stood by the fireplace like a judge whose robe is a tailored suit. My mother placed her hand on my arm and smiled with immaculate teeth. We did it, she whispered, as if telling me about a surprise party for a child. We made it all simple. My brother Jason poured champagne. My sister Vanessa held forth, near the floral arrangements, a slideshow of confidence and jewelry. The market loved it, she said, not knowing the market doesn't love, it prices. Dad clinked a spoon against glass. The room fell performatively silent. We took decisive action, he began with a voice that assumed agreement. We moved out non-strategic holdings. We consolidated. The street appreciates strength. And, he looked at me as if awarding a prize, we relieved you of the burden of your small stake. Cash is better for you anyway. I nodded. Thank you. He blinked. He'd expected protest. Gratitude is the last language bullies learn to translate. Vanessa sipped champagne. Echelon was eager to keep it quiet, which we appreciate. They'll be a stable partner for that slice. Besides, you always said you cared about the company, not the stock. She delivered the line like a kindness. Jason raised his glass. To clarity. To clarity, I said, and set my glass down. And to dividends. Dad waved the word away. We don't do cash dividends. We reinvest. Growth. That's one strategy. I picked up a pistachio and turned it in my fingers like a coin. But it's interesting what lenders like to see in choppy markets. Predictable payouts reduce volatility. Calm hands attract calm capital. Some boards consider adjustments. Vanessa's smile thinned. Boards. Right. I took a breath so soft it moved nothing. I have to go. Early site visit tomorrow. I kissed my mother's cheek. It smelled like perfume named after a city. At the door, Dad touched my shoulder. We did right by you, he said, paternal certainty curling around threat. You'll thank me. I will, I said, and walked out. Every smile, a signed document. At 8:02 the next morning, I joined a board meeting from a muted conference room in a plant that smelled like clean machinery. The chairman, a retired shipping executive, called the roll. Lawyers murmured their names. The investor representative from Echelon listened, his camera off. I listened with my camera on. Eyes calm. Notes neat. No need to hide. The CFO walked us through a deck full of color-coded comfort. Then an item slid onto the agenda like a coin under a door: dividend policy discussion. The investor rep cleared his throat on audio. Our position is that a measured cash dividend beginning next quarter will de-risk the name and broaden the shareholder base. Our fund will support this policy. Dad leaned forward. We don't do that. It's weak. His voice had lost the room a little. The independent director with the long memory spoke next. We've got two lenders who want comfort. The spread will save on the refinance term loan more than offsets the first year of dividends. And, the major holder is aligned. The major holder? Vanessa's voice turned sideways. The chair glanced down. Echelon. It took 8 minutes. We voted. The policy passed, not quite unanimously. The new dividend was 3 times our prior occasional specials, 3 times the number printed in the research notes my siblings only skimmed. A routine board housekeeping item followed, nearly boring: consent to recognize voting instructions for Echelon Holdings. The legal phrasing hid the point, a written instruction delivered with the required opinion letters, confirming the beneficial owner who could direct Echelon's vote at any meeting, including, say, a vote on replacing the family office as the advisor, to the trust that voted the family block. Any objections? The chair asked. No, I said. The attorney smiled into his tie. Behind the glass, one of our line managers guided a roll of film to a spindle with 2 fingers and a lifetime of practice. He didn't know he was teaching me about leverage. When the meeting ended, I walked the plant floor. People waved. I waved back. I'd learned names when I was 23 and no one thought names mattered. My phone buzzed while I stood near a pallet of resin. Dad, what did you do? I put the phone back in my pocket. Every smile, a signed document. Dividends don't kill companies. Debt does, especially the kind with covenants written by a man who understands grief better than lending but stayed in banking anyway. Our family office had pledged, repledged, and had temporarily aligned personal lines to tax efficiency strategies that assumed the universe was impressed. When the quarterly dividend hit at 9:31 a.m. on a Monday, the bank smiled like a dentist and noticed the math. Margin balances met a number and then they didn't. Jason called first. The ocean behind him looked like a green screensaver. We need to talk. The private bank is being ridiculous. They want us to post cash for the line. You need to appeal. Dad says you can tell Echelon to vote to suspend the dividend. I can't, I said truthfully. They have a policy. He squinted. Who are they? Investors. I could have delivered the truth then like a paper cut. I let him keep his thumb unbloodied for a day. Vanessa texted a screenshot of a lender email with lots of bold. Subject, collateral sufficiency. I know those words like I know my own name. She sent a second text, this is hostile. You're an insider. Fix it. Hostile. When you grow up with people who think love is a zero-sum game, they mistake boundaries for war. Mom called next. Her voice trembled with the effort of staying composed. Your father is saying things he doesn't mean. Your brother is panicking. This dividend, does it have to be so large? It's 3 times special because that's the number that fixes the leverage ratio and buys us cheaper debt. Stability is sometimes loud. What does that even mean? She asked, honestly asking, for maybe the first time. I wanted to tell her all of it. The liquidity profile. The term loan triggers. The covenant holiday we negotiated in exchange for a payout that widened our investor base. The fact that our employees' retirement accounts were meaningfully long the stock and I'd rather send money to them than to a lender who treated us like a hobby. Instead, I said, gently, it means we're safe. We, she said softly. I didn't answer. Every smile, a signed document. 2 weeks later, when the research analysts pushed a morning note that said our surprisingly shareholder-friendly policy signaled a discipline, the stock did the only thing stocks truly do, it adjusted its opinion. Up. I watched the chart climb from my kitchen island, next to a bowl of lemons that looked like they belonged to a person who could pretend something was simple. Dad sent a single line, you cost this family millions. Truth, he had cost this family millions in interest and pride years ago. Also truth, he didn't know who this family included. That afternoon, the trust officer who had perfected the art of looking like a fern brought a brown envelope to my office. We should finalize the advisory change, he said in a voice designed never to be quoted. Inside the envelope lay 3 forms: removal of family office as investment advisor, appointment of Echelon Advisory, limited confirmation of beneficial owner direction, protector. I signed each page like it was a thank you note. When does it go into effect? I asked. Retroactively, he said, which is a word that tastes like scotch. The confrontation arrived in a place designed for control, the conference room at my father's club where the windows offered an expensive view of grass and anonymity. They had assembled, Dad, Vanessa, Jason, the family office's managing director who smiled like a spreadsheet error. Dad didn't sit. Reverse this, he said, fingers spread on the table as if steadying the earth. What do you want reversed? The payout. The advisor change. This, farce. I set a leather folder in front of me, opened it politely. The payout is a board decision. The advisor change is a trust decision. Neither is a farce. Vanessa leaned in, bracelets singing softly. You can influence Echelon. You've always been able to manage people in rooms. I considered this. Sometimes rooms manage themselves. The managing director cleared his throat with the dignity of a man who once wore cufflinks engraved with his initials for an internal meeting. There are relationships at stake. Lenders do not appreciate surprises, and neither does the street. We can coordinate language to telegraph a future suspension of distribution. It's not suspended, I said. It will normalize at the new policy. Jason's chair scraped the carpet. We had to sell the second place, he said too loudly. Do you understand? We had to sell a house. I watched him. You pledged it. Houses don't like being used as answers to other questions. Dad's voice dropped. Enough poetry. Who is Echelon? I looked at him the way you look at an old photograph and try to find the person you remember. A holding company. Owned by a trust. Whose trust? I set a piece of paper on the table the way a dealer sets a card when the table has stopped blinking. Protector's direction, Echelon voting instructions. My name appeared exactly once, where it mattered. He read it again, then smiled. It was a good smile, practiced. You manipulated your own family. All I did was buy what you offered to sell. I kept my voice soft. Soft is the only register manipulation can't imitate. You called my shares minor. You voted me irrelevant. You needed cash. You set a price. I agreed. That's called a market. Jason shook his head as if dislodging water from his ears. You could have told us. You could have asked. Vanessa exhaled through her nose. So the dividend. It goes to everyone, I said. Pro rata. That's how math works. I paused. Except there's more of everyone than you considered. I slid a second paper across the oak. Assignment of dividends, employee trust, scholarship fund, supplier relief pool. 2 signatures, mine and the trustees. A small universe of lives not invited to this table would feel this quarter as an ease instead of an edge. We always say we're a family business, I added. Families aren't just who shares a last name. Dad looked down at his hands like they were an instrument he no longer played. You think this makes you righteous, he said. No, I said. It makes me careful. With consequences. The managing director tried a different angle. There are reputational risks to a public squabble, Ms. Harrison. Your actions look vindictive. I haven't spoken a word publicly, I said. And I won't. What I do with my dividends is quiet. What you did with your collateral was loud. Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, swallowed. Margin call, she whispered, a phrase that always sounds like weather. Dad sat at last. The room seemed to allow it. What do you want, he asked, bargaining finally replacing conquest. I closed the folder. Nothing from you. Not your gratitude. Not your advice. Not your permission. I tapped the leather once with my index finger. I want this company to outlive us because it serves more people than us. I want us never to need the word a holiday in front of a covenant again. I want Jason to sell houses he can afford. I want Vanessa to stop thinking jewelry is an asset class. I want Mom to stop pretending there's safety in pretending. He stared long enough for the windows to consider becoming mirrors. You're cruel, he said, and sounded tired when cruelty didn't land like a spear. I'm precise. He nodded, once. The meeting ended not with a gavel, but with the sound of paper returning to a folder. Every smile, a signed document. The next weeks arranged themselves like proof. We closed the refinancing at a spread that made the CFO sleep without clenching his jaw. Suppliers emailed to say the relief pool kept a plant open in Indiana and 2 shifts employed. A forklift driver named Wesley sent a thank you note I kept in my top drawer. The dividend checks landed quietly. My portion didn't go to a car or a view or a dinner where the dessert tastes like apology. It went to a fund named after my uncle who taught me to like numbers because numbers didn't care what anyone at Thanksgiving thought. It also went to an endowment for first-generation engineering students who might one day design adhesive that laughs at German humidity. My siblings called less. When they did, the calls were shorter and the voices didn't carry the echo of a stage. Their houses grew smaller and their decisions grew better. Debt talks louder than I ever could. My mother began meeting me for breakfast in a diner where the coffee is worse and the honesty is better. She asked questions without waiting to correct the answers. I explained what a protective covenant is. She nodded like a person who had finally found the edge of a rug and pulled. Dad stayed furious in a dignified way. The kind that doesn't call but reads every filing. Once he sent me an article about the dangers of financialization, as if he hadn't spent the last decade pledging tomorrow to pay for yesterday. I replied with no article at all. Silence can be the only civilized thing left between 2 people. One Friday afternoon, the chair asked me to walk the floor with him. The plant superintendent stopped us near a machine that made a noise like victory at low volume. "We're keeping the Saturday shift," he said. "We thought we were going to lose it. We didn't." "Thank you." His hands were clean and scarred. "Don't thank me," I said. "Thank the math." He laughed. Same thing. 7 months after the first dividend at the new policy, we held the annual meeting in a hotel ballroom that smelled like carpet and microphones. I wore a navy dress and a watch whose face told the truth. The room filled with short sellers who wanted a show and retirees who wanted a check. I spoke for 8 minutes, the kind of talk that doesn't become a clip on the internet because there are no villains in logistics, only ratios and arrival times. I said the word stability 6 times because some words have to be repeated to become facts. When the meeting ended, a woman in her 50s with a badge that said Local 219 approached me. "My husband's back went out last year," she said. "Your checks kept our lights on. We're not family, but it felt like it." "You are," I said, and meant it. Outside, the sky performed neutrality. I stood under it and understood something my father never will: ownership isn't a seat at a table. It's responsibility to people who will never sit there. My phone buzzed, an email from a bank. Subject: Final paydown confirmation, Harrison Family Office Margin Facility. They had unwound the leverage that nearly ate us. They'd sold, shrunk, softened. They had learned the hard way what I had learned on purpose: sometimes the only way to own anything is to own less. Another email blinked underneath. From Vanessa. Subject: Coffee? No asks. Promise. I stared at it. Then I replied, yes. Sunday. 10 a.m. No jewelry. Bring questions. When Sunday came, she did. She asked about budget categories. She cried once. She didn't ask for money. I walked her through the spreadsheet template I made for myself when I was 21 and believed adulthood was a rumor. She laughed at a row labeled Future You. She promised to use it. Promises like that make better collateral than anything tied to a view. On a Tuesday that felt like a folded napkin, I sat alone in my office with the red folder. I took out the first document we'd signed in that metal-smelling room, the trust deed, my name in the corner like a quiet signature on a quiet painting. I traced the edges. Then I put it away. My attorney once asked me what I wanted engraved on a plaque for the fund. I told him 3 sentences and he laughed because he thought I was trying to be literary. I wasn't. I was trying to be accurate. Some legacies are just debts wearing tuxedos. Some families practice redistribution without consent and call it love. And some victories sound like machines you can hear humming through a factory wall. I turned off the light, leaving the hum in place. Outside, the mountains looked like something that had decided long ago to stop performing and simply persist. I locked the door. Every smile, a signed document. Every document, a boundary. Every boundary, a refuge. And when dividends tripled, the only people who profited were the ones who showed up on time and did the work, some with spreadsheets, some with forklifts, all with the dignity of showing their math. The family that tried to cut me out learned arithmetic the way storms teach sailors, late, loud, and without negotiation. In the end, the holding company held. So did I.